Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They weren't the fastest, the most intelligent, or the most advanced. By all measurable standards, humanity should have been just another middling civilization lost in the infinite tapestry of stars. And yet, the mere mention of humans caused entire galactic councils to grow silent, powerful empires to hesitate, and ancient species to shudder with something dangerously close to fear. The first recorded encounter was an accident, as most first contacts are. The Valak, a proud and imperial race known for their subjugation of weaker civilizations, discovered Earth entirely by chance. They had expected another primitive species, one they could easily conquer and assimilate into their sprawling empire. What they found instead was something unsettling. The humans welcomed the Valak with open arms, eager to exchange knowledge and culture. Their enthusiasm was disarming, almost naive. But as the Valak probed deeper into Earth's history, they uncovered stories that sent chills through their collective consciousness. Tales of wars fought on a scale that rivaled galactic conflicts. Accounts of nations rising and falling in mere decades. Entire species driven to extinction not by natural disasters but by human hands. It wasn't just the violence that unnerved them, it was the creativity behind it. Humans had weaponized everything, from invisible microbes to the fundamental forces of nature. They had split the atom and used it to annihilate entire cities, not out of necessity but as a warning. The Valak had always believed themselves masters of war, but humans treated it as an art form. Then there was the resilience. The Valak observed how humans thrived in environments that should have killed them. From frozen tundras to arid deserts, humans not only survived but built civilizations. They adapted, innovated, and refused to be extinguished. Where other species would have surrendered to fate, humans pushed forward, often at great cost to themselves and their surroundings. But the real horror came when the Valak tried to invade. It should have been easy. Earth was technologically inferior, its people fragmented. Yet, within weeks, the Valak fleet was in disarray. Humans fought like no other species they had encountered. They didn't just resist, they learned. Every battle taught them something new. Every loss made them stronger. And they didn't fight for survival alone. They fought for vengeance, for pride, for the sheer, unyielding principle that they would not bow to anyone. The Valak retreated, their empire shaken to its core. Stories of the failed invasion spread across the galaxy, and with them came whispers of humanity's terrifying potential. Other species sent envoys to Earth, not to conquer, but to learn. What they discovered only deepened their unease. Humans were curious to a fault. They weren't content with understanding their own world. They wanted to explore the universe, to uncover its secrets. Their thirst for knowledge was insatiable, bordering on reckless. Where other species saw danger, humans saw opportunity. They were the first to land on a cursed planet the Zinarans had abandoned for millennia, unraveling its deadly mysteries in weeks. They were the first to harness the power of a collapsing star, a feat thought impossible by even the most advanced civilizations. But it wasn't just their ingenuity that made them feared, it was their unpredictability. Humans didn't follow the patterns other species relied on to predict behavior. They were driven by emotions, capable of acts of unparalleled kindness and unspeakable cruelty. They could form alliances with former enemies, turn on trusted allies, and sacrifice everything for ideals no one else could understand. And then there was their culture. Humanity's stories, music, and art carried a rawness that resonated across species lines. Even the most stoic races found themselves moved by human tales of love and loss, hope and despair. But beneath the beauty lay a dark edge, a fascination with the macabre, with dystopias and apocalypses. It was as if humans were constantly preparing for the worst, imagining every possible way the universe could turn against them. The galactic community soon realized that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their resilience. It was their potential. Humans were always striving to be more, to reach further, to transcend their limitations. They were a species that could turn any disadvantage into an advantage, any defeat into a lesson. Over time, a fragile peace was established. Humanity became a part of the Galactic Council, not as a dominant force, but as an equal member. Yet the fear lingered. for all their diplomacy and cooperation, humans carried an aura of quiet menace. They didn't need to boast or threaten. Their history spoke for itself. The galaxy learned to respect humanity, to include them in decisions, and, most importantly, to never underestimate them. For while humans were capable of great destruction, they were also capable of unmatched perseverance. They were a species that had clawed its way out of the primordial muck, not just to survive, but to thrive. And so, aliens feared humans, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they were something far more dangerous. They were determined. And in a universe of infinite possibilities, nothing was more terrifying than a species that refused to accept its limits. The fear of humanity grew as their influence spread across the stars. Entire species who had once viewed Earth as a backwater world began to see it for what it truly was: a crucible. A place where adversity wasn't just endured, it was refined. Hardship, suffering, and struggle weren't setbacks to humans. They were fuel. Take, for instance, the encounter with the Skorvath, a technologically superior race that had subjugated dozens of lesser civilizations with ease. Their war fleets were vast, their command of energy-based weaponry unparalleled. When the Skorvath declared war on humanity, they believed it would be a brief and decisive conflict. After all, what chance did a fledgling spacefaring race have against an empire that had ruled for millennia? At first, it seemed they were right. Human colonies fell one after another. Cities burned. Refugee fleets fled from system to system, chased by Skorvath warships. Surrender was demanded. None came. Instead, the humans did something no other species had ever done against the Skorvath. They counterattacked. Not with fleets, not with grand armies, but with ideas. Skorvath ships, previously thought impervious to electronic infiltration, suddenly suffered mass malfunctions. Shields flickered, weapons misfired. Entire fleets went dark, drifting aimlessly in the void. The Skorvath suspected sabotage, but they had never known war to be fought with code. Humans didn't need to match their firepower. They fought on an entirely different battlefield. Viruses, algorithms, and logic bombs rippled through the Skorvath networks like a plague. The humans had learned to turn their weakness, lack of fleet power, into a new form of strength. When the Skorvath retaliated by unleashing their infamous orbital bombers on the human colony of New Dresden, they expected the colony to be reduced to ash. They hadn't accounted for the humans' tendency to prepare for everything. The colony's underground bunkers, far more extensive than any logical species would have ever built, kept over 90% of the population alive. Within weeks, the survivors emerged, scarred but unbroken. The Skorvath didn't understand. No species they had ever fought had built bunkers that deep. No species had prepared for planetary extinction as casually as humans did. It was as if humans had expected to be wiped out at some point. Their history, riddled with natural disasters, nuclear tensions, and existential threats, had conditioned them to always have a backup plan, a contingency, an escape route. This was a species that planned for the end of the world as a hobby. Then came the moment that shattered the Skorvath's confidence forever. Captured human soldiers, believed to be broken after weeks of confinement and interrogation, suddenly staged a coordinated prison break across 6 detention centers, at the exact same time. The precision of it was unsettling. No telepathy, no shared hive mind, just sheer willpower, patience, and coordination. They used nothing but sharp stones, loose pipes, and somehow their shoelaces to subdue their guards. Every Skorvath strategist who studied the incident came to the same haunting conclusion. Humans didn't need advanced tools to wage war, they could turn anything into a weapon. No race in the galaxy had encountered this before. The concept of improvisation was foreign to most species. They relied on calculated logic, tactical planning, and technological superiority. But humans thrived in chaos. To them, unpredictability wasn't a disadvantage, it was a weapon. By the end of the war, the Skorvath did something unthinkable. They sued for peace. This was a civilization that had never once offered terms to a lesser race. But the Skorvath High Council knew that if they didn't stop the war, the humans would keep learning. They would keep adapting. And soon, it wouldn't be the Skorvath who were hunting humans, it would be the other way around. The Skorvath weren't the only ones to notice. Far away, on the border of known space, an ancient race known as the Ashari watched humanity's rise with growing concern. The Ashari were the closest thing the galaxy had to immortals. They had seen the rise and fall of empires for over 50,000 galactic cycles. Their philosophy was simple: wait, observe, and survive. But with humanity, something felt different. The Ashari could see the patterns. Every great civilization eventually stagnated. They perfected their methods, relied on tradition, and avoided risk. But humans evolved. Their history wasn't a cycle of repetition. It was a staircase, each step a new height. Civilizations like the Skorvath had perfected warfare, but humans didn't perfect it, they redefined it over and over again. The Ashari once invited a human ambassador to visit their homeworld, a show of respect. During a conversation, the ambassador shared a human phrase that sent chills through the Ashari council chambers. "We'll cross that bridge when we get to it." To the Ashari, this was terrifying. It implied humans didn't need to have all the answers before acting. Most species required absolute certainty before taking action. Humans? They built the bridge while crossing it. To the Ashari, that was more dangerous than any weapon of war. But the event that made humans truly feared across the stars was not a battle. It wasn't a war. It was the event at Skorvath 7. Skorvath 7 was a doomed mining colony. A rogue asteroid cluster struck the colony's orbiting stations, cutting off communications. Normally, in such disasters, the galactic protocol was simple: abandon the colony. No species would dare attempt a rescue from a collapsing orbital station filled with thousands of trapped workers. Except humans did. The rescue was audacious. Entire fleets of human civilian and military ships converged on Skorvath 7 in less than 48 hours. They didn't wait for orders from the Galactic Council. They didn't wait for permission. They just showed up. Thousands of human engineers, pilots, and doctors threw themselves into the wreckage, cutting survivors free with makeshift tools, patching them up with emergency kits they had brought on a hunch. No other species would have risked so many lives for so few. No other species would have done it without being asked. When it was over 30,000 survivors were saved. But the story didn't end there. The galaxy noticed the cost. Over 2,000 human rescuers had died. Died willingly, for beings that weren't even their kin. To most species, this was madness. Sacrifice was reserved for family, for bloodlines, for tribes. But humans had this thing called altruism. They would sacrifice themselves for strangers. This was not logical. It was not efficient. But it made humans unpredictable on a level that no species had ever encountered before. It wasn't just that humans were hard to kill. It was that they were willing to die not for victory, not for glory, but because it was the right thing to do. That was the final, terrible realization for the galaxy. Humanity wasn't the strongest, smartest, or fastest. They weren't the most advanced or the most numerous. But they were the most dangerous. They didn't fight because they had to. They fought because they chose to. They didn't survive out of luck. They survived because survival was non-negotiable. They didn't conquer through strength. They conquered with persistence. No one knew what would happen if humanity ever united with a singular purpose. And that was the fear that haunted every empire, every council, and every species that gazed toward Earth. Because humans had one more trait that no species could match. They didn't know when to stop. They kept going. Even when it hurt. Even when it was hopeless. They endured. They learned. They adapted. And, most terrifying of all, they never, ever forget. The fear of humanity had become something more than myth. It was legend. On the fringes of the galaxy, in the dim-lit halls of war councils and clandestine strategy chambers, there was a phrase spoken in hushed tones: "Do not wake the sleeping beast." The beast was humanity. The most infamous example of this warning came from the Loranes incident. The Loranes Collective, a multi-species confederation of traitors and opportunists, believed humans to be soft targets. Their ships were old, their colonies scattered, and their technology, while clever, was primitive by galactic standards. It was supposed to be an easy score. The collective raided a human colony on Kessler 9, a mining world with minimal defenses and a civilian population of barely 30,000. It was supposed to be a quick-in, quick-out operation. It was anything but. The collective soldiers stormed the colony, seizing its resource caches and enslaving thousands of humans for labor. For 36 hours, they celebrated their triumph. Drinks flowed. Their commanders praised their glorious victory. But the collective had made a mistake. They forgot one crucial fact about humans. Humans always come back. Started slowly. The first sign of trouble was an intercepted transmission, encrypted, looping endlessly through the collective's comm channels. It was nothing but static at first. Then the static resolved into something worse. It was human music. A deep, slow, pounding rhythm. A relentless, echoing beat that crawled into the minds of every soldier who heard it. The song was old, ancient even, a song from a time when humans still fought with iron and fire. A song made to rally the hopeless, to summon courage from fear. The song was The Drums of War. The collective soldiers laughed at first. It was just noise, they thought. But the beat didn't stop. It played on every channel, overriding every frequency, filling the silent void of space with its relentless march. The soldiers couldn't sleep. Their own ship systems refused to block the signal. No matter how many technicians they assigned, the drums continued. Then the lights on the colony went dark. Not from an attack but from within. The enslaved human miners had cut the power themselves. In the darkness, unseen eyes moved. The guards stationed inside the colony vanished. One by one. Bodies were never found. The collective security cameras caught glimpses of shadows moving where no shadows should be. Flickers of movement in the vents, brief shapes slipping through open doors. It wasn't an attack. It was a hunt. Every soldier stationed on the ground was accounted for at 1800 hours. By 1815, only 80% of them remained. By 1840, it was down to 50%. By 1900 hours, the soldiers barricaded themselves in the colony's central command room. They didn't know how the humans were doing it. They didn't understand. It made no sense. Their weapons were superior. Their training was more advanced. And yet, somehow the humans, unarmed, malnourished miners, were winning. The remaining soldiers did what no one had ever expected them to do. They begged. They opened an emergency broadcast to the collective fleet in orbit, screaming for evacuation. "They're in the vents," one of them yelled before his signal cut out. "They don't make any noise," then static. No one heard from him again. By 2000 hours, Kessler 9 was silent. When the collective's warships arrived to clean up the operation, they found something far more disturbing. The colony was empty. No trace of human miners. No sign of the soldiers who had called for help. No bodies. No struggle. Just nothing. All cameras had been destroyed, save for one. It had a message scratched into it with what appeared to be a mining laser. The message read, "You should have left us alone." The drums of war stopped shortly after. But the collective never raided another human colony again. The Ashari, watching from afar as usual, recorded the incident with grave concern. They added it to their growing dossier on human conflict behavior. One Ashari philosopher wrote in his report, "When you corner a human, you do not trap it. You trap yourself." The report was circulated to every council in the Galactic Corps. It became a required reading for officers, diplomats, and admirals across the galaxy. But the Lorani's incident was far from unique. There was the Red Horizon campaign, a conflict that still haunts the Viruk Empire to this day. The Viruk were a species of warriors, bred for combat. They lived by the philosophy that only the strong have the right to rule. When they declared war on humanity, they believed it would be an opportunity to test their mettle against a worthy opponent. They underestimated the concept of total war. The Viruk had fought many species. Most of them surrendered when their fleets were destroyed or their capital planets bombarded. But humans? Humans had no concept of surrender. When the Viruk bombarded human cities, humans didn't beg for mercy. They didn't flee. Instead, they dug in underground just like their ancestors did in ancient times. The Viruk fleet watched from orbit as Earth's megacities burned. But they did not understand. They didn't understand that, to humans, cities were temporary. Civilizations rise and fall, but the people remain. The ashes of the old would fertilize the ground for the new. Humans weren't attached to stone and steel. They were attached to each other. A month after the bombings, human resistance fighters began broadcasting their counterattack. They didn't transmit demands. They didn't request negotiations. They transmitted a schedule. Every day at 12 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated, a Viruk ship would be destroyed. At first, it was dismissed as bravado. But the next day, at exactly 12 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated, one of their supply ships exploded. The following day, a scout ship vanished. The day after, one of their officers was found suffocated in his quarters, an oxygen valve subtly tampered with. It wasn't until the Viruk discovered that human saboteurs had been living aboard their ships for weeks that panic set in. The humans had infiltrated their vessels, living in the maintenance ducts, stealing air, water, and food. They lived like rats in the walls, unseen and unheard. But they were not rats. They were predators. Every 12 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated, like clockwork, a ship was destroyed. It wasn't random. It wasn't luck. It was a message. On the 36th day, Viruk warlord Gornak personally requested an audience with the Galactic Council. His message was brief. We have miscalculated. We request an armistice. The Galactic Council granted it. The stories of humans spread further than their ships. Tales of the Loranes incident, the Red Horizon campaign, and the Kartha 7 rescue echoed in the minds of every species with the sense to listen. But one story remained the most unsettling of them all. It wasn't about war. It wasn't about strategy. It was about time. It was called the Long Wait. A colony ship, the Elysium Dawn, had been lost for over 300 years. Its coordinates were forgotten. The galaxy assumed its crew had died. But 300 years later, an Ashari salvage team detected a faint signal. When they arrived, they discovered the Elysium Dawn intact, orbiting a barren world. They expected bones. They expected silence. They found people, 6,000 humans, alive. For 300 years, the humans aboard the ship had kept their society running. When their fusion core failed, they built wind turbines. When their water filtration broke, they purified rainwater by hand. When their food ran out, they grew crops in microfarms. When diseases spread, they developed treatments. Generation after generation, they endured. They had no communication with Earth. No aid. They did not surrender to the void. They waited. When the Ashari asked how they survived, the colony leader gave them a simple answer. You'd be amazed what you can endure when you have no other choice. That's why aliens fear humans. Not because they are the strongest. Not because they are the smartest. Not because they are the fastest. They fear humans because no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, no matter how utterly you think you have beaten them, they always find a way back. There is one final story whispered in the dark corners of the galaxy. It is the story that no empire speaks of publicly, but every fleet admiral, war strategist, and council elder knows by heart. They call it the day humanity went silent. It started with the Skorvath Dominion. Ruthless, efficient, and with a cultural obsession for preemptive strikes, they viewed humanity's growing influence as an existential threat. Their analysts had concluded that humanity was advancing too quickly, technologically, militarily, and culturally. If left unchecked, humanity would surpass them within a century. So they decided to strike first. The Skorvath called it Operation Nightfall. The plan was elegant. 14 coordinated attacks on human colonies, stations, and ships. All communications with Earth would be severed in a single galactic second. No warnings. No demands. No mercy. And they succeeded. 14 human colonies went dark. Entire orbital stations reduced to rubble. Civilian evacuation ships were targeted first to ensure there were no survivors to spread news of the attack. Within 12 hours, Earth's connection to its outer colonies had been completely severed. The Skorvath celebrated. They had struck first. They had done what no empire had dared to do. Deliver a killing blow. For the next 3 days, the galaxy held its breath, waiting for humanity's response. But there was none. No retaliation. No angry declarations. No desperate pleas for help. Nothing. Silence. For the Skorvath, this was the greatest confirmation of their success. The beast is dead, they declared. Their leaders held parades. Their war council moved on to their next problem species. But some of the more ancient species, the ones who had watched humanity for centuries, were not convinced. Silence, they knew, was not a sign of defeat. Silence was strategy. On the 14th day, a Skorvath supply ship went missing near the fringe of the Zaru Nebula. It was marked as a pirate attack. No one paid attention. On the 19th day, 3 outposts along the Skorvath-occupied colonies reported sensor glitches just before losing all communication. The council dismissed it as malfunctions. On the 22nd day, an officer on the Skorvath battleship Spear of Dawn woke up to find 3 words scratched into the wall of his private quarters. "We are here." The officer reported it as a prank by the crew. No one believed him. But then, it happened again. On the Ember of Glory, a patrol ship stationed at the edge of the Draylen expanse, the words appeared on the captain's console. No alarms. No alerts. Just those 3 words burned into the display. "We are here." The ship self-destructed an hour later, not from enemy fire, but from an internal explosion. No survivors. By the 30th day, the Skorvath began to notice something strange. Their shipyards were falling behind schedule. Not by much, just a day or 2. But this was a species known for precision. Engineers reported small malfunctions. Supply crates misplaced. Critical systems misconfigured. It was chalked up to human error. By the 40th day, those malfunctions escalated. A new cruiser under construction suddenly vented its entire oxygen supply, suffocating 340 workers. Investigations found that the oxygen release valve had been triggered from inside the ship. But the ship wasn't finished yet. No crew had been assigned to it. No records of entry. Then came the 50th day. Every ship in the Skorvath 7th Fleet received the same transmission at exactly 12 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. The message was 6 seconds long. It was human laughter. Not a recording. Not a message. Live. The source of the transmission was unknown. The fleet's communication officers scrambled to locate it, but it bounced off 14 different relay satellites, looping back endlessly. 6 seconds of laughter. Over. And over. And over. On the 70th day, the first vanishing occurred. The Skorvath battleship Unyielding Blade failed to report in during a patrol near the Raxus Belt. Search parties were sent. No wreckage was found. No distress signals. It had simply vanished. This wouldn't have been noteworthy if it hadn't been for the follow-up report. The next day, a Skorvath military supply station received a package. It had no markings, no stamps, no identification. It was scanned for explosives, contaminants, and radiation. Clear. When they opened it, they found only one thing inside. A single boot. It belonged to the captain of the Unyielding Blade. His identification tag was still sewn into the lining. He was never found. By day 100, the pattern was undeniable. Ships began disappearing at a rate of 1 every 4 days. Small ships, large ships, it didn't matter. There was never any wreckage. Never any warnings. Just silence. The Skorvath fleet commanders began issuing new protocols. All personnel are to remain in constant communication. All rooms must be visually monitored 24/7. But it didn't matter. On day 121, a live broadcast was intercepted by 16 Skorvath ships simultaneously. It showed a dimly lit room. Human silhouettes moved in the background, their faces obscured. They didn't speak. They didn't threaten. They simply watched. Then, slowly, one of them walked forward into the light. He raised his hand. 5 fingers splayed. Then he lowered it. For fingers. 3, 2, 1. Blackout. Every ship that received the signal suffered a catastrophic reactor failure. Every ship was lost. The footage was never recovered. On day 200, the Skorvath's High Chancellor addressed the Council. For the first time in history, A Skorvath leader was visibly afraid. "This enemy does not fight as others do," he said, his voice shaking. "They do not come for glory. They do not come for wealth. They do not come for land. They come for us." The Galactic Council watched in silence. None of them spoke. None of them would help. By day 300, over 40% of the Skorvath fleet was missing, destroyed, or vanished. Entire planets had gone dark. Civilian evacuations were ordered on every colony. But no matter where they fled, they found only one thing: silence. On day 365, 1 year after the first attack, the silence ended. It began with a broadcast on every Skorvath screen, every console, every station, every personal device. No matter where they were, no matter how remote or encrypted their communications were, they all received the same message. It was a single video file. It opened with a human face. A woman, calm, staring directly into the lens. "I'm sure you thought you won," she said, her eyes steady, voice sharp and clear. "You thought you were safe. You thought that just because we were quiet, that we were gone." She leaned forward. "We are never gone." Behind her, shadowy figures moved. Dozens. Hundreds. "You wanted to see what happens when you push us too far." Her eyes burned like dying stars. "Now you know." She leaned in so close her face filled the screen. "Run. Run as far as you can. Run to the edge of the galaxy. We will follow you." The screen went black. That was the day the Skorvath surrendered unconditionally. No negotiations. No demands. They simply declared that all hostilities had ended. Their fleets returned home. Their colonies were abandoned. Their empire, once proud and unyielding, shattered under the weight of its own terror. But the scariest part? The part that haunted every other species? The humans never accepted their surrender. No one knew why. The humans didn't respond. They didn't claim victory. They didn't make demands. They simply stopped. For years afterward, Skorvath citizens reported seeing shadows move where shadows shouldn't be. Unmarked supply crates would appear on their stations with strange carvings on the lids. Sometimes, soldiers would wake up to find a single boot in their quarters. No one knows if it was a warning, a reminder, or something worse. But one thing became clear. When humans go quiet, that's when you should be afraid.